IRAs were killed in combat. They have been identified. Master Sergeant Luis De Leon Figueroa and Master Sergeant Jose Gonzalez were killed Wednesday in northern Afghanistan. These deaths pushing the total number of U.S. troops killed in action in Afghanistan now to 14 this year, the most since 2014. Joining me right now is Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. Colonel, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Your reaction to what's taking place in Afghanistan. We know that the president has talked a lot about bringing increasing numbers home, our troops home. What do you think about what's taking place today?
Well, this is a tough one. We've been there a long time. It's a lot of blood and sacrifice. But the president's job is to look forward and say, what are America's interests and what are the best way to protect them? Not one soldier should put their life in jeopardy or be put in harm's way if it doesn't really serve an important interest in the United States. Stability of Afghanistan is very important. I know people say, well, the Taliban controlled 30% of the country. Well, in 9/11, they controlled 70% of the country. It's a much more stable thing. Stability is important. It's important for us. It's important for India. It's an important strategic partner. It's important not to have a base of terrorism come back like the way it did on 9/11. So it's a tough challenge that President's team met over the weekend. They didn't come out with a decision. I think that's really kind of very interesting. I think a lot of us are very skeptical that there's a deal with the Taliban worth having that would allow the United States to withdraw a significant presence as not the guarantor of the future stability of Afghanistan. So I think we struggle with this one for a while.
Well, what about the fact that the president wants to bring the troops home, and he's getting lots of pushback from people like Senator Lindsey Graham, Jack Keane, all feel that if you bring home all the American troops or the bulk of them, it's going to be another Iraq. It's going to be another opening for other terrorists to come in.
Well, I think that's a real challenge for going down that direction, because the U.S. will not have a presence in the country. How are we going to sustain the Afghan security forces to protect the government? How are we going to continue to work on governance? How are we going to continue to ensure that women and children that can go to school, like that progress keeps here? The American Lifeline is the real guarantor of that. And if you pull that away, there's no safety net. And here's the political problem for the president. Let's say you do that now. It's a year and a half to the election. If Afghanistan melts down the way it did for Iraq did for Obama, Obama wasn't up for re-election. Trump wasn't. Trump will have the blame for that. And this could get really, really ugly. A meltdown in Afghanistan, could look like Saigon in 1975. That will not be a pretty picture.
Oh, God. Want to move on to Hong Kong, get your take on what's going on there. The city is bracing for more demonstrations this weekend and a stress test at the airport this weekend. The airport was forced to close multiple times this month, as you know, after protesters staged a sit-in. And then we know this. Google is admitting that it disabled more than 200 channels on YouTube. They did that this week after the company learned that they were tied to misinformation about the protests. Apparently, China is putting misinformation out there about the protests, saying that America is behind it, all this other stuff. What's your take on what this represents?
Well, first of all, smart for Google and Facebook to not only fight Chinese disinformation, but to let people know that they're doing that. I think it helps their credibility and legitimacy. I think basically the situation in Hong Kong is unchanged. Look, the government of China is happy to see Hong Kong taken down a peg or two. They would like for people to see Hong Kong as an unstable place to do business, see that business move to the mainland. As long as the pro-democracy protests don't go to the mainland, I think they're happy to see this continue. There's very little sign that it is going to the mainland. So I think we're in for a status quo that goes on for some time. I'm not sure what the end game is, but I don't see a logic for a Chinese military intervention at this point.
Now, if there were military intervention, the U.S. has made it clear that is a basically no deal on trade if, in fact, the Chinese come in. The president said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the U.S. government's been very smart. Look, they have let China know if you intervene militarily, you will pay a price. Now, the Chinese will. Right, if it's in their interest, the Chinese will do it anyway. Right, but the point is they will pay a price, and they know that, and that's the best thing the U.S. could have done.
Meanwhile, the president is headed to the G7. President Trump, 6 other world leaders to meet in France this weekend at the G7. Used to be the G8. Russia's not included. What are you expecting to take place here this weekend?
I think it's going to be a Valley. I think this is going to be reality TV worth watching. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks. He's meeting with 6 political leaders. He's going to try to convince them on Iran. They're not going to want to do that. They're going to be talking about Brexit in the background. There likely might be a debate on letting Russia back in. I don't think that will happen, but I think there'll be lots of fireworks. I think this will be real good geopolitical theater.
James, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And take good care, Colonel. Thank you. What